seems like the kinds of changes in thought that you're talking about also need to be sort of embedded in the institutions that teach economics, right? So,
yes.
You know, you got to go a little bit further upstream, and you know, I know that you worked with Herman Daly, who is sort of a pioneer in this thinking, in the way we do economics and teach it. But you know, I'll stop I can go on, but maybe you'd like to comment on that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's tough. So we have, I think, economics in academia in the United States, and economics programs. If you want to learn about valuing natural systems and such, you have very few choices of where to go to school. It's tough. But what I do see is new professors coming in at so we've seen like the U.S. Society for Ecological Economics has grown a lot, and it's kind of a new group of who were graduate students saying, you know, we're not solving these problems well. But what's being taught, it's amazing. St. Martin's, I was surprised St. Martin's adopted Herman Daly's book on ecological economics as their introduction to economics, period. And I was shocked. I asked Riley Moore, who's the chair of the department, I said, really? That's a pretty bold step. And he said, you know, well, our whole department got together and we said, well, we keep teaching them one set of things, and then we go back and say in a later course, well, some of those ideas are kind of wrong. We need a sense of scale, and these other problems are here. And so then we decided, well, we better just teach this stuff at the beginning. And I think that you know, there needs to be some soul searching in the economics profession, and that is among chief economists too. Even our state, you know, we look at our state and our chief economists and the data we gather to make decisions in this state, and I think it's, you know, it's a bit obsolete.
You know, econ has the concept of conservation in it, though, and indifference curves, consume today, consume tomorrow. I think it's a value situation, and the idea, well, yeah, if we postpone gratification and conserve, are we willing to make sacrifices today for a better future tomorrow? And I think you got a problem right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Our generation has been, let's mine the soil, let's mine the water, let's get our value out of it. And a lot of people turning a blind eye that the fact that we're sacrificing future resources for a better today, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's not value.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So
And
the concept is embedded, but how you attach value to it in our society doesn't seem to ring very loud yet.
yeah, that's right. And one of the most interesting things, like what we're saying is not about, let me just get off that one slide there. Okay, we'll have it on a hurricane slide. But what we're saying is, just like microeconomics, when macroeconomics came around, we didn't say, well, you know, microeconomics is junk, we're getting rid of it. In fact, microeconomics is really critically important. It still describes supply and demand markets. And so it's not that macroeconomics should be swept away with, but in fact, we've got another tier of knowledge and information that has to come to bear. And one of the most interesting things about the difference between micro and macroeconomics, microeconomics has a when to stop rule. And the when to stop rule is when marginal costs cross marginal revenue or marginal benefits, it's time to stop. And for firms, this is always an important choice. How many people do you hire? How much stuff do you produce? How long do you keep the lights on is it 24 hour or 8 hours a day, etc. So we always have, and that's emphasized very beautifully, I think, in microeconomics, that you go to a certain point and then the marginal benefits and the marginal costs, and it's time to stop. Otherwise, you're in uneconomic production. You're producing where the costs are greater than the benefits, and so you're losing money. But in macroeconomics, interestingly, we don't have a when to stop rule. So we say, how many roads do we need? More. How many of everything else do we need? More. There's no sort of, now we've lost so many wetlands, so we're getting a big trade-off here.
In the fall of 2008, I was in a room of bankers and mortgage lenders, and Bill Connerly, economist out of Portland, was talking. And he knew the audience he was talking to, so he dumbed the talk down to our level and talked about equating housing stock with toilet paper you buy from Costco. And when he was done, basically the message was, I have all the toilet paper I need for a long time.
Right.
You got to quit housing stock building.
Yeah.
Not only was that not received well, but it was actually, he probably lost the contract he had with that group in the ensuing 2 years, and they still are not recognizing it. How do you, so where do we go from here?
See, we have got to improve. Again, if we have goals, we've got to improve our measures. And just think about this for cars. One of the curious things about the financial crisis was as soon as it sort of hit, the purchase of the large four-door pickups crashed. And one thing is, what we do with GDP, we measure the flow of new vehicles produced, but we never measure how many vehicles we've got out there, how much toilet paper is in stock. And the fact was that most of those large pickup truck purchases were more fashionable purchases. People didn't actually need and have to have that kind of pickup truck. And so that's why the purchases just crashed, went off the edge at that point. And so we do need to measure things like stocks and flows. And accounting is really good at that. But of course, we still have some, you might say, 1930s elements to our national accounts, where we're only measuring flows and we're not measuring stocks. And so to think about that, I think we've got some really fundamental rethinking. And then when we think about value, when it comes to flood protection, and this is what we've argued for the Army Corps, and interestingly, they're listening, the chief economist of the Army Corps we were talking to. Right now, we look at a watershed, and Walla Walla, I have a great photo of where the Walla Walla River cut through the levees and just chopped back and forth because the floodway wasn't big enough in a flood. And right now, we only look at levees and dams and structures as providing flood protection. And yet, why don't we look at the whole watershed and say, here's how much pervious soils provide for flood protection, because they actually absorb all that water. Here's how much forests provide. Here's how much lower flow we get from wetlands. And one of the problems is that it's very difficult to model that. We haven't really put those models together. And the Army Corps, to their credit, is saying, we need better water balances. We need to really start looking at that. And then that would give you an idea. Like in Chehalis, we did a report in the Chehalis Basin. And we said, look, if you have $140 million, which is what the government has committed to flood protection, how would that best be spent? Maybe some of it would be spent in the upper watershed. You'd create more labor for sure and work restoring some areas and holding up as much of the peak flow as you can up there. And then you could build a lower levee to save I-5. But if you build a higher levee and the waters are rushing down faster, it's probably going to demolish the levee and flood I-5. And so how do we look at investments in our natural and built capital? But we don't have those measures yet.